Chapter 5. After a quick shower, it was time to tell Jonas the truth. She sauntered into the living room to see Jonas listening to the news. "Do you believe this? Max had the balls to tell the world that he'd filed for divorce, and he's not responsible for anything that you might buy." Alex stood watching and said, "At least he didn't say that he'd cut you off without a penny." "That's because the money is not entirely all his. It's my inheritance, and I worked for him and he knows it. But what I think he has done is freeze everything, and used his lawyers to prevent me from getting to it. He thinks I want that money to be with you, to take care of you, and to help get the children from him. He's right, and I bet I can't get any of it." While Alex and Jonas slept and traveled to New York, Max had been busy. "He probably made it so I can't access my money for a week or two, maybe a month or more." "What are we going to do?" Jonas asked, as if Alex could solve all their problems, when in reality, she had been doing just that since she'd met him. "As long as we don't check out of this place, we'll stay as long as they extend us credit. Jonas, we can only order from the hotel restaurant. I don't know when my attorney will be able to give me some of my money. I hope it's within a day, because what I have in my purse won't see us through a week with how expensive Manhattan is, and for Christ's sake don't drink anything from the minibar." "You're too late. I thought you'd stop drinking." Alex closed her eyes and blew out a large breath. "That was when I arrived in Florida, and before all this heavy shit just happened to me and you. I couldn't help myself, Alex. You understand. When you thought Max was dead, you drank too. Why else did you fall asleep near me and didn't lock the doors?" Jonas had been right. Alex had drank and did fall asleep in his arms, but not because she was that drunk, because Jonas had been too strong for her to peel his arm from around her, and he'd acted as if he needed her to lie beside him, to give him comfort as he slept like a baby who couldn't calm down without his blanket. Alex paced through the room and crossed her arms across her breasts, looking out. She loved to see the Manhattan skyline. It had been a dream of hers in Brooklyn, living around the college. If she could only afford to live in Manhattan in a stylish and expensive apartment, and marry her dream man who could give her his love and a little money. She didn't need a lot of money, only a lot of love, then she'd be the happiest girl alive. She'd finally gotten her wishes, but then, like all things good and bad, don't last long. Maybe misery lasts longer than happiness, she thought. Turning to see Jonas flicking through the channels of the large flat-screen television, she said, "Jonas, I'm going to call a friend of mine. Maybe she can get me a job in a hurry. We need money quick." "If we need money, there's this lawyer who I dealt with before. He'd be glad to lend me some until I can convince Max that I'm entitled to what's mine, and..." "Forget it, Jonas. I know the type of men you used to hang around with, and who are your supposedly friends, and I don't want to go down that road again with you. Try to do something to not get in trouble again. We can't afford to let Max get any more dirt on us than he already had. My friend has a modeling agency, but I think I'm not too old to get something. However, they're looking for women in their 20s for commercials. Something that will pay for our food until next week or a month, if we're unlucky." "But Alex," Jonas pleaded, before Alex interrupted him. "Look, Jonas. I've been around you too long. I love that you want to contribute, but we can't afford for you to go to one of your friends and get in more trouble. We've been out of Manhattan for only 2 years. That's not long enough for people to forget your club and what happened there. But this man who's willing to lend me money doesn't want anything from me. He just wants a friend. I did him a few favors, and he said that if I needed anything, he'd gladly return the gesture. Alex shuddered to think what favors Jonas could have done operating his infamous bondage club. I'm terrified to ask what kind of favors you did for him. Tie him up and have some woman just whip his ass. That's all. Nothing heavy. I knew it, Jonas. But you don't understand, Alex. He wasn't like all the other men, not even like Max or me. This man is a younger man than Max and I. He'd gotten into an accident on his way to enlist into the army. Unlike me, he didn't make it to his post, and unlike me, and his injuries were physical. My injuries were more of the mind, but his were physical. Not his face, not his legs, but only his groin. Alex turned and sat down near Jonas because she'd been interested in what happened to this young man who'd incurred all kinds of injuries, and especially if he was a young. She'd seen some veterans without limbs. It must have been difficult for them, but she didn't know how much pain they had endured because of their injuries at such a young age. She'd known what Jonas had gone through because of his injuries to his mind, and the results, which were drinking and drugs. She'd bet Jonas's friend had suffered both mentally and physically. She couldn't imagine what he'd gone through. Jonas explained how the young man had been born into money, and because he wanted to prove to his father that he wasn't a selfish, entitled son of a bitch, he did something stupid. He took his privileged life, placed it on the line when he joined the Marines, but he didn't quite make it. He had an accident in his sports car. Like you did with your life, Alex interjected. Like me. And Jonas continued telling Alex what the young man had done, and what it had cost him, his manhood. When he'd gotten out of the hospital, and had a chance to heal his body, he visited his club, hoping to get some fulfillment in his life if just for a moment. There wasn't anything left for him. His girlfriends wanted no part of a cripple, Jonas said, as if he'd mirrored the same life as this young man. But he wasn't cripple, Alex questioned, and Jonas interrupted. He was a young man of 25, without a penis. Need I say more? He couldn't have children, and he couldn't have sex. He wanted it, but he couldn't do anything. With his money, the doctors managed to put his body back together, but not his mind. He could have an orgasm. It was difficult but not impossible. Alex sat and listened to the tragic story, and she felt sorry for him. Why don't you come with me to see him, Alex? He's a nice guy to be around, and you don't have to let him know that I told you about his troubles. He loves to look at beautiful women, and once I tell him what you're trying to do to get your children back, I know he'd give me or you the money. I don't want him to give me or you anything. I would consider it a loan for a month, no more, she warned. That sounds like you've given up the idea about doing a commercial to get who knows what, and you'll probably have to get in the union, and that will cost a pretty penny, and after all your work we still won't have enough to make it through the month. The longer it takes to get money together, the better it is for Max to do us more harm. Alex thought about what Jonas had said, and she had to choose the lesser of two evils, and she hoped she would make the best choice. Since you put it like that, then I'll go with you, Jonas. Call him, and tell him we'll visit him tomorrow. I need some food and rest today, Alex said. And Jonas, don't offer him something that you can't deliver. Jonas rose from the sofa with a smile, and headed to where he'd placed his phone. Then he turned, stopped, and glanced at Alex. You're doing the right thing for us. Did Jonas say for us? Alex thought. There is no us, and there will never be. Alex's only thought was to get Max back by any means necessary. She wanted her family, and if Jonas had any sense, he'd spend his time trying to get a life that was worth something. Get a woman that would understand him, and have a family. Alex wasn't on the market. At least she didn't think of herself as that. Whether Max thought of her that way, that had been his problem to solve, because she thought of herself as Mrs. Blackstone, and she wasn't about to relinquish that title, not for Max or anyone. Chapter 6. The next day, Jonas assured Alex that his friend would see them, and he especially wanted to see her up close. The woman who called herself Alex Blackstone, who had captured the heart of the most sought-after bachelor in the world. He'd heard her name and seen her in the papers with her husband Maximillian Blackstone, who had been his idol. When he saw the woman called Alex on Max's arm, he wanted a woman who looked just like her, because to him she was the most beautiful woman in the world with her seductive brown eyes and dark flowing hair. Jonas's friend thought Alex was stunning in her photos and on television, and he wondered if the pictures did her justice. And he had a need to see whether she was as beautiful and drop-dead gorgeous in person as she'd appeared in magazines, and to him. Jonas didn't tell Alex that his friend had requested her services when he owned his infamous BDSM club. He had to disappoint him because at the time she serviced only one man, and that was Max, her husband. But then neither Max nor Christian Kenley knew that she worked for Jonas as a favor to him. At the time, Max didn't realize that his own wife had been the mysterious bondage dominatrix. Maybe it was that which had Max filled with simmering resentment toward Jonas. Even Christian Kenley couldn't understand why Jonas wouldn't share his mysterious dominatrix with him when he needed her services after his accident. Alex and Jonas took the first cab that pulled up to the hotel entrance and climbed in. "Fifth Avenue," Jonas had said to the cabbie. "You didn't say he lived on Fifth Avenue. What is his name anyway? I can't call him friend or friend of Jonas." "His name is Christian Kenley." "Do you mean to say he's the heir to the Kenley oil fortune?" "Yes, and much more. He's an only child. That means he will never be able to have children," Alex interrupted grimly, as she gazed out the car window watching the crowds of people walking along the street window shopping, rushing around to pick up lunch, and headed back to work maybe after an extended lunch hour. Alex missed working, but she thought she had the most important job there was, and that was to raise her children. But now Max had stolen that from her, along with everything else in her life that she loved. She'd made up her mind. She'd vowed that after the last horrible thing that had happened to her, when she'd been separated from herself, her husband and children, that she would never leave them again. Jonas's wedding would be a simple thing, she thought. She'd help Jonas, and show support for him, and prove that he had a family that cared about him. That would have been one day. Only one day, and she'd fly back to her family and with her husband, and let someone else take care of Jonas. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing with Jonas Blackstone is ever that simple. As they neared their destination, Alex turned to Jonas. "I had tried to get an apartment in that building for years," Alex commented in a low voice once the cabbie slowed in front of the building on Fifth Avenue in the heart of the most expensive real estate in the world. When the car came to a stop, and Jonas had paid with Alex's card, he reached into his pocket and dropped his last $20 as a tip. Alex chastised him. "You shouldn't have done that. That may be the last money we have." Standing on the sidewalk in the middle of crowds walking around them, Jonas took Alex's hand and said, "Don't worry. I have this covered." Alex didn't want to tell Jonas just what she thought about his statement. She'd heard it before, and all he had covered was a dead body that she'd help him hide. No wonder Max couldn't take any more, but Jonas was his problem, and when did it become hers? She thought as they stood at the elevator when security asked them questions and asked to see identification. After showing their IDs, he opened the elevator and sent them up to the penthouse. When the door opened, Christian Kenley stood in a magnificent dark blue suit with a white shirt without a tie, and on that shirt gold cufflinks. She remembered how elegant Max had been when she first met him, and even lately after his plane crashed. Alex didn't think that anyone would be that handsome, with his suit covered with dirt. That is, until she looked into the green eyes of Christian Kenley. "Alex, this is Christian, and Christian, this is my sister-in-law, Alexander Blackstone." "Is that spelled with a re or er?" Christian's smile raced across his face and lit up his green eyes. He showed an unusual amount of attention to Alex. What the fuck does it matter how her name is spelled, Jonas thought. Then he looked over to Alex, and she appeared to be mesmerized by Christian. Her smile equally broad. Christian was an extremely handsome young man in his early 20s, 6'1" and a well-toned body. A great package, but nothing inside, Jonas thought. Jonas glanced between Alex and Christian held out his hand, and Alex placed her palm inside his, and they gazed at each other. Clearly there was some kind of connection, and Jonas didn't like it. But what kind of connection could Alex have with a man like Christian? Of course he was good-looking, single and rich, but he had this handicap. He couldn't have sex with Alex, well, not in the traditional sense. Jonas passed his hand over the two hands belonging to Christian and Alex, and somehow that spell was broken, and they both turned and smiled at Jonas. "Jonas and Alex, please come in. We have a lot to discuss," Christian said as he walked between Jonas and Alex after raising his arm, and Alex tucked hers under his, and he placed a warm palm over her hand. They strolled into the vast living area, where Christian seated Alex on a velvet sofa, where she could look out and experience the glorious view. "I've never seen anything like this," Alex said with a closed smile aimed at Christian. "I'm sure you have. You are Alex Blackstone after all." "But there are views and there are views," Alex said, offering Christian a wide full-teeth smile. Christian stared and offered her a wide grin. Everyone had always complimented him on his beautiful smile, after they'd lauded how handsome a man he was once he'd turned 25. Jonas opted to sit across from Christian and Alex. He wanted to watch the two. Not that he thought Alex would be interested in Christian. How could she? She had his brother and him, of course. Or did she? Jonas knew that she'd always have him by her side if she needed anything, but now with Max acting like a dick, Jonas wasn't sure about anything anymore. "Yes, the view from where I'm sitting is stunning," Christian complimented, and Jonas realized that Christian wasn't looking out, but his view was dead centered on Alex. "Would you like something to eat, or something to drink? I asked my cooks to prepare a spectacular dish for the both of you. Whatever you desire, I'll have them cook it for you now." Christian pressed a silent buzzer and his chef, a large woman, came in and presented them with menus, and then she left. "Just take your time and decide. Would you like a drink? Wine, maybe?" "I'll have a glass of wine," Alex said. "I don't drink anymore," Jonas declared. Alex glanced across at him. "We came to discuss business, not have lunch." "Maybe Alex would like to stay and have dinner with me, and you can go back to the hotel or wherever you'd like. I can have my driver take you back." Alex watched Jonas and knew he was getting agitated by the way Christian became instantly enamored with her, and she didn't want him to say or do something rash and screw up her chances of borrowing money to keep them going until she could get her money. They needed the money like yesterday. Never had she thought she'd be in a position like this ever again. She thought that having money would prevent her from needing it. She had all the money she desired to keep her comfortable, but she didn't have the money now when she really needed it. There would be a lag between the time she got the money and she needed it to live, and she couldn't allow Jonas to fuck that up by getting jealous or being overly protective of his brother who had cast them into this chaos of uncertainty. "We can all have dinner together, but first we should discuss why we're here," Christian interrupted Alex and turned to her. "I know why you're here, and before you say anything, you can borrow as much money as you'd need. There are no stipulations on the money except maybe have dinner with me, alone." When he'd said alone, he turned to Jonas. "Jonas must have told you that I'm harmless." Alex's eyes fell to the floor in embarrassment. He'd known Jonas before, and naturally he'd known how he behaved, and how any man around Alex must have wanted her, even if he didn't have the equipment to have her. Nevertheless, Jonas had all the equipment now that his stupid brother Max had put Alex in a tenuous situation. "I will sign the contract," Alex said, "if you have your lawyers draw it up and I can get the money by tomorrow. I would be very appreciative of that." Her eyes met Christian's soft eyes. Christian raised a thick eyebrow and turned to Alex with his piercing green eyes and aimed a pampered smile her way. "You can have the money now at this moment. I don't want to have you sign a contract or anything else. I'm giving you this as a loan, but I wanted to make this a present to you. However, I knew that you wouldn't accept it. Maybe next time, I can give you something you don't want to give back." Jonas watched in shock and apprehension. He knew where Christian was going with that, and he had to intervene. "Alex and I are in need of the money until our funds come due. We're planning to open a business," Jonas said with a shaky voice. Jonas's voice wobbled a bit whenever he lied. Christian laughed because he knew the whole story. "I have no interest in what you want the money for, only that Alex needs it. Don't think I'm a fool, Jonas. I know what your brother has done to you and this beautiful woman, and he's the fool. I just want her to have a chance to fight him for her children and anything else she wants to do to him. It's all in the papers and on CNN. He really is hurt, but from what I read he has no right to be. What man would throw the baby and the bathwater out, but an arrogant man who must have found someone else to satisfy his lust?" Alex furrowed her brow and narrowed her glance at Christian. His words were piercing and unsettling. "I know a little about Maximillian Blackstone, and before this day, I'd envied him. He had a reputation around New York. I think I was privy to his antics at your club, Jonas." Jonas had been in deep thought, and Christian may have caught him thinking about what he'd done by bringing Alex here to talk to Christian Kenley. Clearly it was a mistake, but Jonas couldn't do anything now. He couldn't unfuck this decision. Then he turned his attention to Christian. Alex looked on and in silence, and wondered if that could be true what Christian was suggesting. Now that Christian had sown doubt into her relationship with Max, it hurt. Never had she thought anything could upset her that much. Jonas's knowing glance turned to Alex from watching Christian. Alex had been trying to maintain a good front, pretending to be cool and unaffected by Max's behavior toward her, but Jonas knew her every expression and the way she clasped her hands to the way she changed her position when she sat. Those mannerisms signaled that she was upset. "My brother is not a fool. He's just disappointed, and he'd recently been in a plane crash, and he isn't thinking clearly. When he comes to his senses, he'll realize that he'd made a mistake, and will come to Alex on his knees begging." "When will that be?" Christian said dryly, and crossed his arms and turned slightly to Alex. "Did you know he'd filed for a divorce and gotten a judge to grant it?" Christian locked eyes with Alex, who appeared to be in shock. Jonas reached for the Daily News, sitting alongside the New York Times, picked up the morning paper and read the headlines. Maximillian Blackstone, the rich industrialist, files for a divorce from his beautiful wife, and is granted one in a day. Go figure. When could Max have had the time to get a judge to sign off on that? Jonas wondered. Then he looked at the name of the judge who'd signed that obvious illegal paper. Jonas knew that name, Caulfield. For the right price, Judge Caulfield would sign anything. Caulfield had been Max's go-to judge when he needed to get Jonas out of jail for marrying an underage girl in Las Vegas. Caulfield had offered his signature for a price on just about anything that Max had to clean up for Jonas to get him out of a million fucked-up situations. Jonas knew Alex was in trouble. Chapter 7. When Christian's driver drove Jonas and Alex home, silence filled the car, filled the space between Jonas and Alex, filled the hotel suite that they had to live in together until they could go their separate ways, but that would be much longer than they had anticipated. Max had thrown down the gauntlet, got in the first blow that almost took Alex's breath away. She didn't expect him to get his divorce, file for it, yes, but have it finalized without her, and she didn't have a chance to fight it. No, all that came as a shock. Jonas had warned her about what Max was capable of doing, but she wouldn't listen to him. Alex thought she knew him better, but now her heart was broken, and she didn't think he was capable of breaking it more. And then this. Not only did he take her children, her livelihood, and tried to kill what love she had left for him, but he almost destroyed her. Alex opened the hotel door, sat down, and tried to make sense of everything. Then she looked to Jonas. Why didn't you tell me that he was ruthless and heartless? I told you, but you didn't want to hear me. Just like I'm telling you now, don't get involved with Christian. But you brought me to him. Alex sat back and closed her eyes and toed off her shoes. Jonas rushed to Alex's side and sat on the floor and massaged her feet. No, don't do that, she said, looking down at him. Sit beside me. Alex patted the cushion beside her. When Jonas sat, he looked to Alex and issued another warning. Yes, I know I was foolish enough to ask you to come with me, but I'm warning you again, don't get involved with him, and pay him back as soon as you can, Jonas advised. I'd planned on doing just that, but first I have to teach Max a lesson he will never forget. If you try to hurt someone you love by being hard and callous, then you'd better know what you're doing. Alex's eyes grew dark. She stared out past the view of Manhattan and buildings, as if to reach out and snatch Max's heart out of his body, if he had a heart. What are you planning, Alex? I see your beautiful face and the mischief in your eyes, and I know something is coming, and it's not going to be pretty. I want to see my children first. Does Christian have a jet? Of course. I'm going to ask him to use it to go to our Montana home, and I'm going to take my children while Max is away looking after all his shit. With the money that I get from my inheritance and borrow from Christian, I can keep Max in court and away from me until I can make him realize how much I love him and how much he loves me. I've never needed anyone in my life as much as I've needed Max. Maximillian is the only man I'll ever want, and I'll be damned if I let him go that easily, especially after what he'd done to me. Jonas brought Alex into his arms, and he thought he saw tears pooling in her eyes, and he brought her closer. I just wanted to help you, Jonas. It was all for Max. I could have stayed and cared for my children, but you were like one of my children. Alex glanced at Jonas with her teary brown eyes. You were like a wayward child, Jonas. You know they have one in every family. I thought if I could help out with you, then it would lighten the burden on Max, and it did, but it brought on other thoughtless consequences. He thinks I love you in a sexual way. Jonas didn't respond because he knew his heart, But he knew Alex never felt about him the way she felt about Max. She never would, even if Max wasn't in the picture. She'd never love him that way. The way he'd envisioned. To have her in his arms, to be able to see her beautiful body when she'd become pregnant for him. That was just a fantasy he'd likely keep to himself. Jonas stood as Alex held on to his hand. I have to take a shower, and I have things to do. I can't let you take care of me. I have to find a way to get my money from Max. Jonas let Alex's hand slip from his, and he wandered into his room, sat on the bed and made a call to Max. He didn't answer several rings, so Jonas decided to text him and use the strongest words possible. Jonas, Max, what the fuck are you doing? Max, I'm busy, call me back later. Jonas, don't you hang up. I deserve an answer, and Alex does too. Max, why should I talk to someone who's been fucking my wife? Jonas, are you that delusional and your thinking is so morbid that you would think that I, or better yet Alex, would do something like that? You? Have you had your head checked out, because I think you've lost your mind in that plane accident? No text came in and then the phone rang. It was Max. What the fuck are you calling me and texting me for, Jonas? And how dare you suggest that I could be wrong about you and Alex? Well, who the fuck are you, that you think that no one is to question your thinking? I called to ask about my money. I need you to place some in my account so I can help Alex. You took everything from her. Her children. Max's voice lowered to a disturbing level. They're my children too. I have a fucking right to them, since Alex found it necessary to leave them with nannies to go off with you and your fucked up life. She didn't go off with me. You are the one who doesn't deserve the children and Alex. Now we're getting to the heart of the matter. You want that money to take care of Alex. Do you think I would release money so you can go off with my wife? I thought you didn't want her. You got a divorce, for fuck's sake. You've taken everything from her. What more do you want? Jonas asked, and he added, she's no longer your fucking wife. Max's silence and anger could be felt through the phone as Jonas waited for a response. I want her to come to me. I'm her master, her dominant, and she treated me as if you are. I need to know that I'm in control. You've always been in control, Max. She adores you. She'd do anything for you, but you're the one who's running her away into another man's arms. There was silence, and then Max added, is she running into your arms? For Christ's sake, Max, have you completely lost your mind? Did you hear anything I've had to say? She's enlisted Christian Kenley to help her. I have to go. I'll get back to you. Max hit the red button on his phone, and Jonas sat on his bed breathless. He knew he couldn't tell Max that he was the one to get Alex involved with Christian Kenley. That alone would seal his fate with his brother.